Chairman, I can confirm the live stream has started. You may recommence the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome back. Hope you all had a decent lunch, or a very short lunch. I apologise. The next item on the agenda is the Internal Audit Strategy and Audit Charter, which, Holly, I hope you will do a presentation on.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, Holly Sykes, Chief Internal Auditor. Presented to you are the revised Internal Audit Charter and Strategy. It is protocol that these are considered by the Audit Committee on a periodic basis. You will remember that I discussed these with you all at the virtual training day earlier this month. The objective of this strategy and charter is to define the internal audit's purpose, authority and responsibility in accordance with the UK public sector internal audit standards. It establishes internal audit's position within the council and reporting lines, authorities to access records, personnel and physical property relevant to the performance of audit work, and defines the scope of internal audit activities. I'm hoping they're self-explanatory, and the work that we did during the virtual training day will enable you to have reviewed these with ease, but willing to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I'm quite happy with everything. Anybody else have any questions? I can't see any questions. In which case, can we go to the recommendation, please? Which is that the committee approves the Internal Audit Strategy and Audit Charter. Can I have a proposer for this, please?
Chair.
Sorry, was that Councillor Kenny?
Yes.
And a seconder?
Yeah, happy to second.
Councillor Wood, thank you. And the vote, please, Sarah Goodall.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So we're voting the recommendation as set out on page 146 of your report, that the committee approves the Internal Audit Strategy and Audit Charter proposed by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Wood. If you could please state if you're voting for, against or abstaining on the recommendation. Councillor Biscoe.
Yeah, sorry I missed the last one, Sarah. I'm for.
Councillor Desmond.
I'm for.
Councillor Edgerton. Councillor Edgerton. We'll come back to Councillor Edgerton. Councillor Ecclesmith.
Late again.
Councillor Ecclesmith.
Hello.
Hello, David. Councillor Ecclesmith, your vote, please.
Sorry, I've only just got back, so I don't know what I'm voting for. I'll have to abstain, I think.
Okay, Councillor Ecclesmith. Councillor Fitter.
Support.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Jordan.
For.
Councillor Kenny. For. And Councillor Wood.
For.
Yes, Chairman, that has been passed. 7 votes for with 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. The next item is the counter fraud update. Holly, are you going to introduce this, or do we go straight to Jason?
Straight to Jason Pengilly, please.
Thank you, Jason.
Good afternoon, Chair. This is my update report on counter fraud activities for the team covering the 1st of April 2020 to November, the 30th of November.
Councillor Biscoe, thank you.
Sorry, just covering the period the 1st of April 2020 until the 30th of November 2020. And the team continues to record significant successes within its investigative activities, and continues to deliver significant savings through the work carried out by the team, and this activity is documented within this report. I'm happy to go through the specific details, but I'd hope that or anticipate that the report has been read. I'm happy to address questions, but I'm quite happy to run through the specific details or of any part of this report. Particularly, I suppose, this period covers the pandemic, so the team have had to adapt to a different way of working slightly, but we've still managed to deliver on all the areas of fraud identified within the performance report for the year. So particularly with regards to benefits and council tax, the work in that area, DWP was impacted because their staff were seconded to other other priority areas of their business, and so our activities in that area did diminish for a period, although that is now starting to recommence with them being diverted back to counter-fraud work. The National Fraud Initiative continues and has continued through the period. So the team has continued to work on the single person discount exercise, and that has identified over £300,000 of savings to date as of the 30th of November. And in addition, we did the business grant work around the National Fraud Initiative as well. That's also detailed within this report. Tenancy fraud activities have continued, and during this period, we've still managed to recover 5 properties, which was a significant achievement, bearing in mind the restrictions that have been in place, and as I've said, how we've had to adapt our activities and process to investigate. Our digital work is still continued, so within the team we provide a huge amount of support to the freedom of information teams, and during the period to date there were 124 requests to the team, which was quite significant. The work had continued through that period, even through lockdown. We were still getting a consistent level of requests for information within the team. So in terms of finances, we've identified as detailed within the report, around £90,000 worth of council tax savings associated through council tax support, single person discount investigations, and council tax activities. As I've said, the National Fraud Initiative SPD exercise, we've identified in excess of £300,000 worth of savings, and in addition to other NFI activities as detailed within this report beyond the SPD exercise as well. We're just about to commence the new exercise for this year in relation to single person discount and business grants. Again, that activity is just underway, so we're anticipating the new business grant matches back shortly, and the single person discount exercise has already commenced and we've already started that activity. So I'm happy to address any questions in relation to any part of the report or any element of the activities that we've done.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a question. We'll go with Councillor Desmond first.
Thank you, Chair. As always, Mr. Pengilly, very interesting reading. I have a simple question in 2 parts. How much have you recovered, and how many successful prosecutions, together with the number of civil actions awarded?
Okay, so in terms of the recoveries, that's always a complicated matter, because we identify the loss or identify the issue, and we raise those issues with the respective teams. So I'll give you the example, single person discount particularly, we will identify any area of concern or where there's an issue that needs to be addressed. That will then be sent to the revenues team for them to amend the account. That account then will be issued to whoever it's payable by, and then the revenues team would seek that recovery. So we don't get involved in the recovery actions. So it's quite difficult for me to say how much have we recovered of that, because obviously there's a number of other teams that are involved within that process. We obviously go some way to identify that, and where possible we will try and support recovery, but it will be down to the individual service to recover those figures. In terms of prosecutions to date for us this year, obviously because we've been restricted by COVID, and particularly we obviously have had issues with trying to interview people face to face. It's made it very difficult. That's not purely Cornwall Council. That is a national issue that's been recognised through fraud teams nationally, and there's been lots of discussion and dialogue about how that activity can recommence moving forwards, with lots of options, and unfortunately none have been forthcoming to date that have been satisfactorily by other authorities. So we haven't been able in a position to date to carry out any formal interviews, but obviously it's something that we are planning on moving forwards as restrictions ease. So that's going to. Does that answer your question, Councillor Desmond? You're on mute, Councillor Desmond, sorry.
Thank you very much. So just to be clear, when it comes to recovery, the account holders take the responsibility for doing recovery.
So yeah, so if it's council tax, it will go to the revenues team to apply it to an individual's council tax account. Then they would be billed for that in normal process, and then that recovery would be done through the normal council tax recovery methods.
And the fraud aspects of all of that? So
in terms of fraud, where even in the cases where we may have prosecuted those individuals in the past, that it still becomes a civil debt effectively, so that would still be done through civil or normal recovery methods, or should payment not be made, then it would be through civil recovery methods.
If I can summarise this at the moment then, the number of successful prosecutions effectively 0.
For this, I'm just double checking, for this year, yes, because of the COVID restrictions that we've had in place upon us.
The civil actions that are being undertaken and resulted in an award,
so
less than 10?
Yes.
And money's recovered again?
Money's recovered, money's identified, probably around 400 to 500,000 identified.
Right. Right. And then as a rule of thumb, how much of that do you expect to recover? You've got 400,000, what do you get back? All of it?
So we'd expect it to be recovered in full by teams making their own recoveries through, as I said, if it was council tax related, it would be through council tax recovery through normal standard collection.
All right, thank you. It's perhaps an interesting one to carry forward, Jason, but for some other day, of whether we can actually cross-refer that the stuff you identified does get collected. Can I move on to Councillor Jordan, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jason. The report is quite enlightening. I know a lot of this is deliberate, and they deserve everything they get. But what about the ones that accidentally make the claim? Is there any way that more education could be given so that when people are either getting the rent for their house or claiming council tax relief or whatever, they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing? I mean, I don't see the forms. So, you know, then my dog's starting to bark. But yeah, you know, if we knew what was in the forms, it might be easier. But I was just wondering if education would make it better.
So in answer to that question, obviously there is an application process that people will follow to request support either through the council or through whatever means. Those forms will identify within that the expectations upon somebody who's claiming support around the issues surrounding the information that is actually necessary to initially support the claim, but secondly also what the expectation is upon them throughout the period of their claim in order to ensure the claim is accurate and up to date at all times. I will stress, you know, in all the cases that we deal with, we don't proceed to criminal action on every single case, because not every case will meet that criminal threshold. So it's those cases that do meet those criminal thresholds will be the ones that are pursued. So so it's not every single case will proceed through that avenue, and that may cover off the things that you've identified there, Councillor Jordan, with regards to maybe the errors or the mistakes that are made.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Biscoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for my singing. I was just getting something up to read the paper, the agenda paper, not the paper. I wondered, Jason, if I might ask you whether you think that as we've gone through a year of home working, whether that's had any effect on, say, for instance, whistleblowing and actually people watching other people and so on, and whether any issues arise from it, and whether it affects your ability to undertake, you know, investigative process in quite the same way, because in many cases, if you did investigate somebody, you'd be doing it in their own home, for instance.
So obviously, by home working, we've had to adapt our investigation techniques slightly. We can investigate various, with various methods from home, and I know that we have conducted quite a few activities over the phone with people just to clarify certain things and points. So we have done that. In terms of home working, I think that managers obviously have control over their employees and they know what they're delivering. So in terms of whistleblowing, it is an option still. It's not something that as an authority we have significant numbers around. We do have whistleblowers occasionally, and our report identifies that to date so far this year we haven't had any. But it's not to say that we don't receive them, because we do. But certainly how home working has affected people's thoughts and views around whistleblowing, I couldn't probably answer that comment, I'm afraid. It is still something that is actively promoted and supported, obviously, by myself and my team. So it's not something that, as I said, that we get a huge number of whistleblowers around anyway. I can see that Mel's got her hand up now as well.
Go on, Mel.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I just wanted to add to that point. I think, and I'm sure Jason will correct me if I'm wrong, that many of our whistleblowing complaints came through via email, so I don't think it'll affect people's ability to make those complaints. I think that your Councillor Vista, apologies, your point went a bit beyond that, actually, and you were sort of saying, will it be less detectable? And I don't really have one particular strong view. My gut is probably not, because actually there's more openness and transparency in this virtual world and the way we're all working. But I think that's something we'll just have to keep our eye on. And all we can do is ensure that we continue to promote our whistleblowing policy and make sure that the avenues into whistleblowing complaints are still accessible.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on really from what Bert was saying, that with COVID, obviously we had to help assist the government in getting money out to people as quickly as possible. And obviously there is an element of fraud in underneath there, which has been highlighted in the papers, etc. Are we responsible for trying to recover that money? And then do we have the mechanism then how we pay that government? Do we have to then pay that money back to the government, having deducted our costs, which I expect will be quite substantial, Jason? That's the mechanism I was asking about, really. Is there an encouragement for the public to come forward and whistleblow? Because a lot of public are genuinely cross that small businesses and even large businesses have fraudulently claimed this money from the government, or inadvertently, as Councillor Jordan was saying, made mistakes and have claimed money that they shouldn't have claimed. Yeah. So my question is basically, what mechanism will be for recovering it? Is it going to be the same as normal? And then is there the mechanism how we pay the government, having deducted our expenses or something? How does that work? So in terms of recovery of any business grants that were paid incorrectly, we would normally, at present, we're seeking recovery through our normal methods, so that the individual company or business or whichever would be invoiced for that directly. And then that invoice would take standard recovery procedures. And I know that that's managed with the revenues team. That's not actually managed by our team. And I know that there has been some discussion around who's actually responsible, whether that's going to be central government or local authorities. And local authorities at the moment, certainly Cornwall Council included, we are reviewing, obviously, as we've done, the claims, and where it's considered they were incorrectly paid, we are making those actions to recover those grants from the individuals in question. But in terms of the actual scheme and the process, that's been handled through the revenue service. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fitter, you're next up, but I wonder if I might jump in front of you because I'm on the same subject as Councillor Wood was, if that's okay. On page 174, you refer to 6 cases where COVID grants have been incorrectly claimed. But over the page, you talk about where you've had referrals from the revenue section in respect of a number of recipients of grants. How many is that roughly?
So, sorry, I'm just trying to find the correct paragraphs. So,
you say the fraud team were assisting the revenue section in their pursuance of repayment of grants from a number of recipients, which revenues identified through their own post-payment validation processes. Is that a big number or a small number?
Relatively small number.
Right, thank you. That was about my simple question. Councillor Fitter, I'm sorry, I jumped in front of you.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely no problem at all. Yeah, it's really an explanation, really. When I read this report, I'm sort of not up to speed with it, and that's the fact is some of my colleagues are. I haven't joined the committee only the last 2 months. But when I read the one about whistleblowing, I assumed this was referring to people within the employment of Cornwall Council who were bringing concerns to the attention of the service. But from what I gathered from what you're talking about now, you're referring to whistleblowing as members of the public passing on information to the authority. Is that correct, sir?
So it's twofold really. So whistleblowing is defined obviously, and we have a whistleblowing policy which you quite relate to, Councillor Fitter, with regards to the internal whistleblowing of employees, staff members. Members of the public can refer through whistleblowing as well, but we also have our own hotline and email where people can report any instance of fraud directly to the team as well. So they're actually two quite distinct different elements to report fraud to the authorities. So you have almost a public facing where people can report issues around maybe council tax or housing benefit fraud that we would then pass to the DWP. But the whistleblowing is regards to internal. So that's more of, we have the whistleblowing policy where people can report concerns directly to the team.
Yeah, so super. And obviously I must have missed it because when I heard it sort of nothing received, I thought, oh well, but you've obviously received numerous complaints on your hotline about people's perception that something may not be quite right with people's standard of living. And is the number of complaints you received in the report a matter of interest? Is it?
No, it's not actually. The number of hotline calls we received isn't in the report today.
Okay, don't worry, sir. It's okay. I'm not trying. I thought I might have missed it. That was all.
No, it's not specific.
I have to say that when I was hearing you talk, I thought, well, this means no. But I'm aware, you see, of somebody who had made a complaint, and I thought, well, that's funny. Okay. So I understand now entirely. So, thank you very much indeed.
That's okay. I'll just clarify. So at the moment, I mean, in the period in question, we had actually 30 calls through our fraud hotline, but that's our fraud hotline. We also have a fraud email account, and we also receive issues by post.
Yes, so, I can imagine you do with unsigned letters. Yes, we all know
yes,
that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nobody else, can we go to the recommendation, please? Which is set out on page 169. A proposer and a seconder, please.
Happy to propose, Chairman.
Councillor Wood to propose, Councillor Jordan to second, and to the vote, please, Sarah.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. So, members, you're approving the recommendation, voting on the recommendation set out on page 169 of your report, proposed by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Jordan. Can you please say if you are for, against, or abstaining from the recommendation? Councillor Biscoe.
For.
Councillor Desmond.
I think Councillor Desmond's had to drop off. He put his apologies in the box.
No problem. Councillor Edgerton.
For.
Councillor Ecclesmith.
For.
Councillor Fitter.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Jordan.
For.
Councillor Kenny.
For.
And Councillor Wood.
For.
Yes, Chairman, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much. The penultimate item on the agenda, COVID strategic risks update. Who's leading on this?
That'll be Zoe Davis. Councillor Harris.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councillor Davis and the rest of the Audit Committee. Hello. Yes, this report twofold really. First of all, it's to give you an update on progress made with mitigations against the Council's 4 strategic COVID risks. And secondly, to update you on progress made to further embed risk management at the Council, which fulfils this committee's remit in obtaining assurance that risk management arrangements are working effectively at the Council. So in terms of the 4 COVID strategic risks, at the point of the first wave, a suite of COVID-related risks were established, which has been updated since in terms of the response to the second wave. I think it's worthy to note that these are subject to reporting on the Council's corporate performance report. So they will go through the route of being seen by CDT, IPHB and being reported to Cabinet. So there's quite a lot of scrutiny around it and in terms of progress made. Currently 3 are scoring as very high, which are the impact on the economy of Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, the impact of health and the impact on communities. And 1 is high, which is the impact on finances. On page 188, this gives details of each of those 4 risks, the description, the risk owner, the score and the target score, which you'll be familiar with in terms of the strategic risk updates you've received, and a suite of mitigations in terms of actions that are currently in flight to reduce these risks. The second part of the report deals with progress made to embed risk management across the Council. 3 areas to note briefly is our continuing working with services to get business critical and operational risks, which sit below the strategic and COVID, fully documented, embedded and recorded on our systems. And also we're undertaking risk maturity assessments still and testing across directorates, which will give some level of assurance as to how mature risk management is across directorates. And this will feed into our annual audit of risk management, which will be subject to scrutiny by yourselves. And finally, we've been reporting the past couple of audits that we've undertaken a sort of COVID 360, which has looked at kind of national and global risk evidence in terms of what could affect the business operations of an organisation. And had a look internally to see what mitigations we have across our strategic COVID and business risks, and done a bit of gap analysis, a bit of a desktop exercise, which flags some potential, and I'll use the word potential carefully, areas where we may have gaps in our mitigations or in actions that are being taken, which have been subject to discussion with the Section 151 officer. And they also went to IMT this week, who are the management team responsible for the sort of COVID response for consideration. So just to make you aware that that analysis has occurred. I've used the word potential because the fact that we've raised these areas as part of this study doesn't mean that those risks aren't being managed. It might be that they are part of business as usual and being managed in different ways, for example, through internal working groups and boards. So this exercise was very much just to kind of do a 360 check, a bit of a stress test and flag up to senior management for them to sort of to take on board and review and have a think about whether the organisation is thoroughly covered in these areas in terms of their risk response. So more than happy to take any questions on that. And I think there's probably some other finance and audit colleagues here that might be also suited to give more technical detail on content of risks.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Wood.
Thank you. Just a simple question. We don't seem to be highlighting the risk of lost drop of revenue from council tax non-payment, which could rear its head with a percentage of people who are finding themselves with very low income or no income through unemployment. Is that not perceived as being a major risk at this juncture? Thank you.
I think we're talking about that risk in terms of revenue, then in terms of revenue to the council, that would potentially be covered off in the impact in terms of the council's finances and the risk there. But we also have a risk around the impact of community, which acknowledges kind of welfare issues and the inability and the struggle perhaps within the wider community. in terms of the impact of COVID on them and their personal finances?
Thinking of the loss of revenue to the council, when it must move it down in people's priority of spending, council tax must drop down a little way. And at the moment, we have a very high collection rate in the county, and I congratulate the officers on that. But I think to maintain the position we're up in the top group in the country, to maintain that is going to be very, very difficult in these hard times that are coming over the hill. Thank you.
John, if I can jump in, I'm sure I've seen somewhere in budget figures that there is an increased provision for bad debts, for want of a better expression, on council tax. I think it's to an extent already been built into the budget.
That's fine. I must have overlooked that, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Russell has his hand up. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, in the budget proposals which will be coming to members in a few weeks' time, we have built in higher levels of bad debt, lower collection rates, etc., into all the assumptions that we have built in and around the budget. We are monitoring them very closely in the current year. Collection rates are they are below what we have previously experienced, but they're not as low as perhaps some people may think. But they are being monitored, and it does all feed into that all-encompassing sort of financial risk there around the whole of the council's finances, because obviously, as you say, council tax and business rate collection is a significant element of our funding.
Thank you, Russell, for that. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. My memory is working then. Councillor Kenny.
Really just pointing out that the collection rate with the parish budgets, the collection rate was down. The worry is for next year. This year is quite manageable, but next year, who knows?
Okay. Can I just ask, so Councillor Kenny, you weren't expecting an answer to that. It was an observation, I think.
Just an observation.
Yeah. So, Zoe, in paragraph 2.4, you referred to this risk survey, etc., that you've done, and you said the results of the data from 46 correspondents have been analysed and we will be subject to consideration by the council's COVID incident management team. I think it'd be quite interesting for somewhere within the council members to see that, whether that's a sort of survey report that should come back to the audit committee or a different committee. I'm not sure. I don't know whether Mel's got a view on this as well. Either of you.
I think in terms of coming back to the audit committee, as I mentioned before, this raised areas of potential risk. I think once those areas have been considered by IMT in their completeness, and they perhaps come back and say, well, actually there is a gap here, we're going to perhaps decide that this now needs to be a strategic risk or a COVID risk, then you will get visibility of those. And I think if we didn't have any assurance and we thought there actually is a big risk gap here.
Yes, I have. I couldn't speak to him, but I've sent.
Then we would report to you by exception. I'm not concerned that there are big risk gaps that aren't covered following my conversations with IMT and Tracy on these.
All right, thank you. Are there any more questions on this subject, or can we go to the recommendation, which very simply notes the progress being made by management to mitigate the council's COVID strategic risks and the progress made with embedding risk management at the council? A proposer, please.
Chairman, I'll do it.
I'll second.
That was Councillors Biscoe and Kenny, if I got it right. And to the vote, please, Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So proposal as set out on page 179 of your agendas, proposed by Councillor Biscoe, seconded by Councillor Kenny. When I call your name, for, against or abstain, please, members. Councillor Biscoe.
For.
Councillor Edgerton.
For.
Councillor Ecclesmith.
For.
Councillor Fitter.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Jordan.
For.
Councillor Kenny.
For.
And Councillor Wood.
For.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. And the final item on the agenda is any other business that the chairman considers to be of urgency. And you'll be delighted to hear that there are none. But can I, before we close, thank all members and officers for their contribution to what's been a really good, albeit long meeting. Thank you all. And at that, the meeting is closed. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Cheerio.
Hey, Chairman.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.